The next day started off even better. I got pretty good at figuring out who needed help. Old people needed assistance, as did moms with kids, people with crutches, and that sort of thing. Generally, the more miserable people looked, the more they needed me, and the more they paid. One guy with an arm in a sling and an eye patch gave me $7, but a young guy in a tracksuit handed me 11 cents. I kept hoping someone would get wheeled and wearing a complete body cast. I'd be rich. But people in full body casts don't grocery shop, I guess. Still, at this rate, I'd have enough money in a couple of weeks. I felt good. I felt dog-owning rich. I'm sure Lexi wasn't making this sort of money, even with all of her tutoring work. Plus, she had to help do everyone's homework. You couldn't pay me enough to do extra homework. As I carried Mrs. Prince's bag across the parking lot, I practically heard my new dog's joyful bark and smelled his thick cotton soft fur. "Here, dog not named Fluffernutter," I said in my head, throwing an imaginary stick and having my imaginary dog fetch it. "Good boy, good boy." My imaginary dog loved me more than anything in the world, and he hated Lexi, because my imaginary dog had excellent taste in people. We rolled around in an imaginary meadow laughing, while a dog not named Fluffernutter yapped in delight and then ran off to chase an imaginary butterfly. Lost in thought, I put the bag in the back seat of the car. I walked over to the driver's side window and held out my hand. "Young man, what are you doing?" Mrs. Prince looked thin and weak, and it took her about 5 minutes to walk to her car, but you wouldn't know it from her shrill voice. It cut through the parking lot like a burning cookie-triggered smoke alarm. She stood 6 cars away in front of an empty trunk, tapping her foot. I scratched my head, confused. I wandered a few steps toward where she stood, and then the car behind me, a 2-door convertible, honked and began backing out of its spot. "Where are my groceries?" demanded Mrs. Prince, hands on her hips, her voice shattering the air between us like a baseball through a bedroom window. By the time I realized I had put the bags in the wrong car, it was too late. "Come back!" I screamed, waving at the convertible, chasing after it. But the car was already merging into traffic on Grand River Avenue. The old and shrill-voiced Mrs. Prince stood by her trunk, waiting. "Where are my groceries?" she screeched. "Driving away?" I stuttered, pointing to the convertible a block away and getting farther in the distance. She yelled at me, and I bet they could hear her shouting on the moon. Astronauts probably covered their ears. She used words and phrases like, "irresponsible," "well, I never," and "you should be fired." And those were just the ones I could repeat without getting in trouble. After a good minute, Mr. Snood hurried outside. He wore his white apron, streaked with blood. I'm sure Mrs. Prince wished it was my blood splattered on him. I explained that it was an honest mistake. I put the groceries in the wrong car. It was sort of funny if you thought about it, right? But I guess Mrs. Prince didn't think it was funny one little bit. She said she would never come back, that I was a disgrace to bag boys all over the world, that unless I was fired on the spot, she would visit the store every day for the rest of her natural-born life and tell everyone what a terrible place it was. "How about if you were a vampire?" I asked. "Then that would be an unnatural-born life, right?" Mrs. Prince just stared at me. I didn't repeat the question. Mr. Snood made me pay for the groceries out of my own pocket, which wiped out all of the money I earned that day. "And you're fired," he added. "But you're not paying me anything," I pointed out, "so you can't technically fire me, can you?" Apparently he could. As I walked away, Mr. Snood shouted after me, "Now I know who you are! You're that kid who ruined my canned fruit pyramid display last year. Good riddance." Mr. Snood had a pretty good memory after all. So just like that, I needed a new job again. It wasn't my fault at all, though. It was the convertible's fault. And Lexi's, just because she's Lexi and everything is her fault. But I needed to start earning money. If not, dog not named Fluffernutter would never bark while chasing a butterfly, imaginary or otherwise. I thought about cat named Fluffernutter meowing in a meadow, chasing a butterfly on her own. I shuddered at the horror of it. Our next chapter is chapter 10, Friday, March 9th. Money saved $45.06.